I stand here. Does it fit well with the camera, or is it too high? Is it okay? Good. Cut now? Okay. Okay. And I come to front.
So hello everyone, good afternoon or evening or morning, depending where you are right now. So it's my great honor to introduce our next speaker in our evolutionary talks at the University of São Paulo. And this time it will be postdoctoral researcher Tobias Kordsmeyer. Sorry, you can correct my pronunciation. And he's from the university in Göttingen, doing very interesting research on physical attractiveness and intrasexual competition and intersexual selection, and also facial and vocal perception. So it's all topics that we are really interested to. So we are looking forward to your talk. Thank you very much for being here with us.
Thank you, Jaka. It's going to work with the cable. Okay. Come to the front, it's better. Okay, thanks for the nice introduction. Also, thanks for inviting me, of course, to give this talk over here at the USP. Yeah, I'm Tobias Kordsmeyer, and I'm quickly going to introduce myself in a second as well. Let me just once tell you the title of my talk. It's on intra and intersexual selection, as Jaka already said, and especially it's on male traits, which are sexually dimorphic. So to see what mechanism is more prevalent in human males in terms of mating success. Okay, so yeah, who's talking? My name is Tobias, as I already said. To give you like a very brief bio, I did my bachelor's in psychology at Groningen in the Netherlands. I worked with Georg Stulp. Some of you might know him on his research as well. Did my master's in cognitive and evolutionary anthropology at Oxford. And then afterwards, a PhD in biological personality psychology at Göttingen University, where I'm now back again as a postdoc after having spent 3.5 years in business, which was okay, but not good enough. So that's why I came back into academia and do some research now and also teach in psychology mainly. Yeah, and now I'm here at USP for 6 weeks. Hi to the people online as well. So I'm now here for 4 weeks at the USP for research stay, doing a cross-cultural project on face perception on the halo effect in both Brazilians and also Germans. But that's not what I'm going to talk about. I'm going to talk about sexual selection, intra and intersexual selection. And what I wanted to take away from this talk is mainly some insights on mechanisms, as I told before, intra versus intersexual selection in humans, mainly men in this case, and also to get some ideas on how a diverse set of human traits can be assessed, both objectively measured and also subjective ratings. I'll go into that later. And then also to reflect on different mating success measures as well in this kind of research. To begin with, imagine you're in a bar, maybe in Pinheiros, for example. There's an attractive girl sitting there, and there's 2 guys approaching her. And the question is, who's more successful? Is it the quite attractive, handsome guy on the right-hand side, whom she would accept as a partner for longer or for shorter? Or is it the more maybe dominant guy who's objecting to the first guy? So that's on intrasexual competition. Yeah, so I did investigate mechanisms of sexual selection with the outcome of men's mating success, so the number of sex partners basically in a heterosexual context. I'm going to look at some effects of sexually dimorphic traits for which there are sex differences between men and women. And I'm going to look at the mechanisms. Is it more via female mate choice that men are successful, so because women find them attractive? Or is it more because they are dominant, competitive, and then successful towards other men? That would be male-male competition, the intrasexual selection. Yeah, sexual selection, as you all may know, probably is a mechanism of evolution besides natural selection, also artificial breeding. There's the two pathways I already mentioned before, intra and intersexual competition. And those sexually selected and dimorphic traits are not directly and naturally adaptive, but more indirectly adaptive because they're either attractive to mates, to women in this case, or they're supportive in direct same-sex, so male-male competition. And that's what I did investigate, these two mechanisms. And for traits, there's evidence of past sexual selection, so there has been sexual selection on those traits. If they're sexually dimorphic, so if there's differences between men and women, for example, on those traits, men are, for example, taller, the voice is a bit deeper, actually quite a lot deeper than women's voice. If it develops, or at least increases in expression around puberty, like, for example, physical strength, which increases a lot in men, for example, during puberty, and it's related to at least one of the two mechanisms of sexual selection, and relates to some outcome of mating or reproductive success as well. And I'm going to focus on the latter two to give you some examples on those traits. For example, it could be very deep, very masculine voice, like this, I think it's a blues singer from the US, can have a very masculine, very dominant face as well, very strong upper body, like this bodybuilder and actor, can be very aggressive and competitive as well on a behavior basis, or you can just simply be attractive, have a nice face, handsome face, or very attractive and handsome upper body or body overall as well. The traditional view was quite that female mate choice is quite apparent and quite dominant in a way. For example, hypotheses like the sexy son hypothesis and also the Fisher's runaway selection, they suggest it's actually the females who is choosing the men based on their attractiveness. There's been quite some evidence in both humans and also other animals, other primates as well. But then actually, by now already 10 years ago, there was quite a comprehensive study by Hill and colleagues. They questioned the predominance of female mate choice. They actually looked at quite a few men's traits, facial masculinity, vocal masculinity, body height, and a composite measure called girth. So average of the biceps girth, chest and shoulder girth, and also the body weight as well. Looked at effects on mating success, which was self-reported by the men, and then the mechanisms of sexual selection, male-male competition, and also female mate choice, so reported attractiveness, which was in this case reported by peers from sororities and fraternities, so other men, other women who actually know the men quite well from everyday life. And the mating success measure was the number of sexual partners for the last 12 months, which they self-reported, and that's an item from the revised social sexual orientation inventory. Yeah, here's the first main result already. So they did find a positive effect, quite a medium size, quite a strong one actually, of reported dominance on mating success, but no effect, as you can see over here, of attractiveness reported by women on mating success. So the more dominant guys, which were seen as more dominant by other men, they reported higher numbers of mates, of sexual partners in the last year, but not the more attractive ones, which speaks against the first hypotheses I mentioned. And it's quite some interesting empirical findings, so nothing going on over there. And they also found some effects of traits. For example, girth was related to both male-male competition, dominance, and also mating success. Some effects of height, for example, on attractiveness, which however wasn't related to mating success as well. And they concluded that actually that speaks to the role of dominance, male-male competition in sexual selection in men, rather than to a dominant role of female reported attractiveness for men. Okay, there's been further studies on other characteristics, for example, on vocal characteristics. There was one study by Putz and colleague looking at the highly sexually dimorphic voice pitch, and they found that perceived dominance was quite strongly related to voice pitch. So guys with a deeper voice were seen as more dominant, but they were not seen as more attractive. There was no relationship to sexual attractiveness, so short-term attractiveness, speaking again to quite a strong role of male-male competition as a mechanism of sexual selection. Yeah, the main questions I focused on in my study was firstly which traits, which sexually dimorphic traits actually do influence and are related to mating success in men. And the second question was on the mechanism. Is it mediated by more physical dominance as rated by men, as seen by men, or more mediated by sexual attractiveness as perceived by women, in this case, on female mate choice? The aims were actually to have an extended replication of the study by Hill and colleagues to include some further traits and maybe have a larger sample as well. And we also included baseline testosterone, which might be implicated in sexual selection as well, and physical strength actually, as measured by this dynamometer, so objectively measured. We had the typical measures of height, voice pitch, and also upper body size, which is quite a similar measure than the girth one in Hill and colleagues. And then we had quite an extensive set of subjective ratings based on faces and also bodies rated by men for dominance and also rated for attractiveness by women. So faces, bodies, and voices as well. And there are quite a range of different mating success measures, so not just the sex partners in the last 12 months, but also some other measures which I'll explain in a second, to have a look how robust those results are across those different measures. So to give you an overview of the objective traits, we measured baseline testosterone based on saliva samples in our lab. We had physical strength with the dynamometer over here, and body height, voice pitch, upper body size, which was a combination of chest girth, upper arm girth, and shoulder width as well. And then a range of subjective ratings on facial, bodily, and vocal attractiveness and dominance based on such stimuli. For example, we had men enter our 3D body scanner. We created some videos based on that one so that participants could actually see the whole body from all angles and then rate the dominance and attractiveness of those men and their bodies, and typical facial photos as well. And then as proxy measures of sexual selection of the mechanisms, we had further ratings of physical dominance, so speaking to male-male competition, and sexual attractiveness based on video recordings. And these were men's self-presentations where they talked about themselves for a minute, discussing their strengths and their positive sides, so to say, which looked like this in the lab. And then other people rated it for attractiveness and dominance in a computer rating study, a typical one. Yeah, we had 10 to 15 raters, males and females each, and the inter-rater agreements were quite good, above 0.90. We actually had a partly longitudinal design as well. So at the first time point, there was the main assessment of 164 men, so an okay sample size, I guess. And then at time point 2, 18 months later, we had another online questionnaire assessing the men's mating success after those 1.5 years, to just have a second, more robust measure as well to compare results. Yeah, then we had a range of mating success variables. We had the number of sex partners in the last 12 months, like Hill and colleagues before as well. We had the full social sexual behavior scale, those 3 items on the number of lifetime sex partners, the lifetime one-night stands, and the sex partners without relationship interest. And at time point 2, we had the same measures, plus another one based on Peru's work. That's the number of potential conceptions, which looks not only at the number of sex partners, but also the number of coital acts. You would reach a higher score if you would sleep with someone more often. And there's some fixed number for the perception, for the percentage of the conception probability as well incorporated into that measure. So quite a comprehensive measure, the number of potential conceptions. Okay, then on the statistics, we ran firstly structural equation models with objective traits or the subjective ratings on the left-hand side as predictor variables, then some mediators in here, the female mate choice, so the rated attractiveness and the rated dominance over here as well, and mating success as the outcome measure with the different parts, the different versions and different models. And then additionally, we had some further more complicated analyses from evolutionary biology. They're called selection analyses. Some were multivariate, looking at linear effects, but also nonlinear effects, so curvilinear effects, looking at quadratic and correlational effects as well, and canonical analyses, which were basically response surface analyses, as shown over here, looking at effects of vectors rather than individual variables, which is supposed to have more accurate measures for the strength of sexual selection. Okay, looking at the results already for the first structural equation model. On the left-hand side, you can see the objective traits for now. I've got the results for the ratings, for the subjective ratings later. And you can firstly see quite a strong and significant effect of male-male competition, so perceived dominance on mating success. In this case, that's social sexual behavior, but no effect like Hill and colleagues for attractiveness. So confirming the first study as well with a similar effect over here. And then some significant effects of those objective traits as well. So for example, upper body size and also physical strength, they were quite strongly related to rated dominance as well. Some effects on attractiveness as well. For example, voice pitch, there was an inverse effect, which is not surprising, I guess, that more deeper voices were seen as more attractive by women as well. But then again, no effect on mating success at all. Then we ran mediation analyses as part of the structural equation model. And we found two significant indirect effects. So one for upper body size, another for physical strength. And there was a mediating effect of male-male competition between those two variables and mating success. So those guys with a larger upper body, who were stronger physically, they achieved a higher mating success, apparently because they were seen as more dominant by other men, but no mediation effects whatsoever for female mate choice in any of the objective traits at all. And that's quite similar to the effects found in Hill et al., who found some effects for girth for this composite measure, quite similar to the upper body size over here. So again, quite in line with the previous findings also. Just to give an overview for different time points. Time point 1, we had a couple of more significant findings or effects compared to time point 2, maybe also because power was lower. Time point 2, the sample size was a bit reduced. And we had quite some consistent effects overall for male-male competition, but not female mate choice. So quite a consistent picture overall, with effects on social sexual behavior on the one item of the sexual partners in the last 12 months. However, no effects at all for the number of potential conceptions. So for some reason, it didn't work in our study. The more comprehensive measure didn't quite provide any significant effects at all. And also overall, no female mate choice for any of those outcome measures, neither at time point 1 nor at time point 2. Then looking at the objective traits as well, besides the subjective ratings, to give an overview as well, we found some consistent effects of upper body size, both on female mate choice, but it's only a curvilinear effect, positive effect on male-male competition as shown before, and also the positive effect of mating success. And for the subjective ratings, at least we had some effects of facial attractiveness. So the guys with apparently more attractive faces, they were seen as more dominant and also more attractive overall, of course, based on those video recordings. But there was no effect of the subjective ratings on mating success at all. So not much going on there for the subjective side. And then, of course, the main effect of perceived dominance on mating success outcomes. Yeah, so what does it all mean? Seems like, again, physical dominance is quite implicated in sexual selection and mating success, but not so much sexual attractiveness. And that actually mediated the association of upper body size and physical strength with mating success as well. Again, speaking to a stronger role of male-male competition compared to female mate choice, which replicates earlier findings of Hill and colleagues and also some other findings which are similar as well. So it seems like actually not the guy who is handsome approaching the girl directly is successful with her, but more the first guy or the second guy actually who's more dominant, more aggressive, maybe more competitive to the first guy, in the end wins this battle. Yeah, with some strengths and limitations as well in our study, which I shortly want to talk about. We had at least a partly longitudinal design over a period of 18 months, which is quite nice to confirm the results. And it's not just a purely cross-sectional study. We have quite a big range of sexually dimorphic traits, so some objective traits, some more from a subjective perspective as well. We considered two different kinds of analyses, the structural equation models and also the selection analyses, and they were pretty much in line as well, so quite robust, those results. The sample size, on the other hand, was overall okay, but not great. Especially not for the more complex selection analyses, would have been good to have a slightly bigger sample, so that could be replicated, I guess, in a bigger sample as well. And then, of course, a big downside for all the research is just looking at mating success, looking at self-reported mating success as well. You never know how accurate those measures are, those self-reports are. Some might be actually inflating their self-reports on the number of sex partners, which has been shown, I think, especially for men compared to women a bit more maybe. So in the end, it would be nice to have reproductive success measures, which are of course difficult to assess since you wait to the end, ideally, of the reproduction period, so like 50, 60 or whatever it is for men in most cases. So that's always a big downside for that kind of research. And then I think the proxy measures of sexual selection, those video-based ratings, they weren't as ideal as in the Hill et al. Study, who used actually peer reports from the sororities and fraternities, which were a bit more valid, I think, compared to those video-based ratings only. So peer reports would have been better, of course, and more accurate. Yeah, so the take-home messages, of course, is that there's quite some evidence for sexual selection based on male-male competition rather than female mate choice in men. And especially the stronger men are those with a larger upper body, maybe also with a more muscular upper body. They win against, maybe intimidate other men, and then achieve, or at least they self-report, a stronger mating success as well. Yeah, and then most results were robust across those two types of analyses, as I said before. Now the study was actually published in 2018. We did the study in 2015, so it's already 7-8 years since then, and 5 years since publication. What happened since then? So just had a very quick look at the literature on the studies, actually citing my paper, what the recent findings were on the topic of sexual selection. Just want to give you some very brief ideas on that one. There was a meta-analysis quite recently by Lidborg and colleagues. They looked at voice pitch, height, and testosterone, amongst others, and they found some effects on mating success, but no effects on reproduction. However, there was quite a strong and quite consistent effect on strength and muscularity. So pretty much in line with the physical strength measure in our study, and also the upper body size measure, for which we had effects as well, which predicted both mating success and also reproduction even. So quite in line with our findings, but no effects of facial masculinity, and the digit ratio for the former, we didn't find an effect as well, so quite in line as well. And there was a study in 2018 by Swire, how you pronounce the name, on human vocal behavior, and they found quite some strong effects actually on the number of sexual partners for the articulation rate and louder voices, also some facets of dominant vocal behavior, I guess. Then there was quite a comprehensive study by Stour and colleagues on masculinity, looking at facial masculinity as well, for example, and they didn't find a linear positive effect, but more curvilinear effect, that actually preferences of women were strongest for average masculinity in faces. So 2 masculine faces weren't seen as attractive, and 2 feminine faces weren't seen as attractive either. However, if you look at co-parenting partners, there was quite a positive linear effect actually for facial masculinity, but not for short-term mates, surprisingly. So that needs to be replicated as well, I think, in further studies. Then there was a study by Marco and Jager as well on artistic and athletic propensities, which was quite nice as well. And they found that actually the arts were more implicated in intersexual selection in women, whereas the arts were more implicated in intrasexual selection in men. So quite a contrast there as well. And they also found that for men, for example, athleticism was actually implicated and related to high short-term mate value especially. So quite some nice additional evidence there as well. And there's just a quick list of further reading, some reviews, some comprehensive studies as well. There's a nice chapter, for example, by Torrance looking at dominance in men. There's a main review as well, plus some own studies. They did also on hormonal effects, for which we didn't find any evidence in our studies. There were no effects of testosterone at all, which is nice to have a look at, I guess, as well. And then nice overview article on voice and sexual selection by Swire et al., if you're interested in vocal characteristics also. Okay, yeah, that's it from my side for now. Are there any questions, any comments before I might mention some questions as well? Feel free to approach, to ask. Any questions, any comments, any criticism is welcome as well, of course. Anything which wasn't clear, any question marks? Good. Want to take the mic as well?
My question is, I actually don't know if they measure, how they measure the fertility, right? Because, well, usually the research on attractiveness is on mating success, right? So actually how many different sexual partners the person had, which is some kind of proxy of potential possible reproductive success, especially in males. But on the other hand, it should be correlated. So the attractiveness or dominance, right, should be actually correlated with, for example, sperm quality, because the person can have like 400 sexual partners, but but infertile person wouldn't have any any offspring, right? So actually, it would be, I don't know if there is actually research on attractiveness or dominance perception and really some kind of fertility status or sperm quality as specifically in men. Do you know about this?
I don't know, I'm afraid, but of course it's a big topic. How valid those mating success measures are. Another topic actually I want to raise as well is the quality of their partners. You could have, I think, easily by trend like less qualitative partners, but many of them, but it's quite difficult to get the really attractive ones as a partner, as a parent, and physically as well. And then, of course, you never know on the contraception, if she's been using contraception or not, if she's been fertile or not while having sex, how often they had sex, of course, with the individual sex partners. So I think it's quite imprecise and very rough proxy for reproductive success in the end. So it's, I think, showing some potential to have real sex partners in terms of conceiving, but it's not a very direct and accurate measure. So there's a lot to improve and to study more on that one, yeah. And on fertility status, I'm not sure actually. I mean, there's lots on actually perceptions of men based on fertility status. There's been some null findings as well, which didn't show this kind of binary strategy in women. But on the sexual selection mechanism in men, I'm not sure if there's any research. I need to have a look myself. Yeah. But quite a critical point, of course, how valid those measures are of mating success. Yeah. Okay. Yep. Want the mic? Online people, I guess, yeah.
I just have a question because I saw like on the slide where the correlations were shown that the correlation between like testosterone and male to male competition was like 0.00, so no correlation. So even though testosterone, like in popular media and everything, is like basically said to be one of the most important factors. So with studies like this, we can basically say that the influence of testosterone basically amounts to 0, or is that like a too much of a statement to make? I don't know.
Certainly definite just based on one study, but the trend is actually the effects of testosterone are quite small, smaller than expected. We did some similar studies actually on personality, and you might expect that testosterone is related to extraversion, maybe to dominance, but we didn't find any effects. There's been meta-analyses on dominance and testosterone. They found like very small effects, 0.08 or something, robust, significant, positive, but very small as well. It's not like this typical macho hormone or something, which you would expect with a very big implication for behavior. There's some maybe small relationships with some variables in behavior, personality maybe as well, but for many you just don't find the effect. And the second part is actually that I just included baseline testosterone. So it's like the measures in a very calm state. And for that you typically see lower and smaller effect sizes compared to the reactivity. So when you're in a aroused state, when you're competing, for example, your testosterone goes up actually. And those measures of reactivity, they are more strongly related to measures of competition, for example. Found some effects on competitiveness in those contexts with testosterone, but not baseline, only reactivity. So we could have or should have maybe even included the reactivity measure, which we didn't for some reasons, but for baseline you wouldn't expect much actually. It's quite a small effect, maybe even 0 effect. Yeah. Mm-hmm. There's been some studies, of course, on those proxies for sexually dimorphic hormone levels, for example. But yeah, for the current levels from saliva, but also from blood samples, there's not much going on, at least in terms of baseline levels. For activity, it's a bit different. But for the current levels in a calm state, there's not much relationship with behavior, with personality, for example. Yeah. So might be a bit disappointing, but that's how boring it can be, how complex it can be as well, I guess. So there's other factors, other mechanisms. Yeah. Okay. Any further questions? Yep.
Thank you. I don't know if I didn't listen to you, but did you find any effect of age and on dominance or attractiveness in men? Can you show the results again?
Yeah, also quite an important and central question, of course. In our study, we controlled for age actually and didn't make much of a difference, but the age range was quite small anyway. So the idea was actually to only include men who were supposedly active on the mating market, both single and relationship, but mainly at an age where they could actually be in a state of finding a partner between 18 and 35. So not those in a long-term marriage with kids, with a family as well. So those were excluded. You might find different effects, of course, but we didn't have a look at them. Only the younger ones. Yeah. At least over here. No, it was robust. So. Depends on the woman's age as well and how old he is. As long as he's not too old, I guess might work. But yeah, it would be interesting to have like extended age range, of course. Look at older men, maybe after first divorce or something, and then what the mechanisms are as well when you're back on the mating market. But we didn't check that one. No. Actually, I mean, the bivariate associations, if the older ones were more dominant or more attractive. Yeah. Might be. There was some actually very young ones, like 18, 19-year-old boys with a very boyish face. But I didn't check any associations with just like directly with attractiveness. When I checked for influences on those effects over here, there was nothing, was robust to, including age, for example. But in terms of direct relationships with attractiveness, dominance, I need to check. Yeah, but okay. Okay. Anything else? Yeah, so shortly talked about qualitative aspects of attractiveness instead of just only looking at the count of partners. There might be some further relevant sexually dimorphic traits which need to be studied as well, besides the ones I included and mentioned so far. Of course, then on the other hand, I just focused on men in this study, mechanisms in men. Would be interesting to look at women as well, of course, how attractiveness or also dominance maybe the more social dominance works in terms of mating success for them. And also look at associations in non-heterosexuals, which is, I guess, your big expertise based on your research. So I leave that to you, but that's, of course, also a relevant question in this field of mating success and sexual selection as well. Yeah, if there aren't any further questions, I'd like to say thank you also to the people online. If there's any questions later, you can always contact me via email. It's not here, but you're going to find me online or find out otherwise. So thanks a lot. And,
Thank you very much for a nice talk. Thank you everybody who is here with us, and thank everybody who is online as well. And see you next time.